Uncompromising entrepreneur community. Welcome back. In this episode, you will be listening to an interview Devon and I did a few weeks ago with Clifton from the Niche Finder podcast. This is a podcast series that focuses on influencers who have found their niche and monetized it. During this conversation with Clifton Manning, you'll hear us discover our journey from niche discovery through the origin of our uncompromising entrepreneur coaching business. Hope you enjoy.
Uncompromised, 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 we uncompromised, uncompromised, we uncompromised, and I got it. Look, what does it take for you to be great? Keep it 100, bro, you know the answer. Pursuing your purpose, creating profits, building legacy. Anything less, how could you even fathom? Just sit back and imagine all that can truly happen when you pursue your passions. Yeah. So eliminate distractions and get back to that action. That's the law of attraction. You gotta build a team to build a dream. Family, faith, and focus. Counsel can only build a king. Are you prepared to reign? Cause whether you weather the weather won't change. Whether you weather the weather won't change. Stay true to the vision. Stay true to the mission. Gotta get to the finish. Take a moment to listen and come and see it through our eyes. We'll show you what it means to live uncompromised. We're uncompromised. 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 We're uncompromised. 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 We're uncompromising. Yeah. Uncompromised. We're uncompromised. We're uncompromising. Yeah. Uncompromised. Uncompromised. You're uncompromising.
All right, we want to welcome everybody to this episode of the Niche Finder Framework or the Niche Finder podcast. We have some special guests on today. For the first time, I have some fellow podcasters, and these guys are definitely rooted in not only the podcast space, but also, great men of God who definitely sharing and developing others through legacy in leadership. That's the name of their podcast. It's also the name of their YouTube platform and LinkedIn. You type in legacy and leadership, you're going to see a ton of content coming up because these guys stay on their grind. And I love it because they have a way of prioritizing their time, that they don't neglect family, they don't neglect personal time and development time, and they even do things in seasons, man. I'm so interested in hearing what they have to share with the community today, that it really makes me honored to have them on the show. But two, I want you to feel the wealth of information, and as they say on their show, the nuggets that I know that they're going to share with us is going to be something special. So really quick, before we bring them on, I want to give you a just high level, just a synopsis of their bio. So Jimmy and Devon combined for having over 30 years of leadership experience in the corporate and small business arena, creating and sustaining strong mission-driven culture and leadership teams that deliver results to the bottom line. They bring a wealth of experience leading and developing operation-driven strategies for improvement and creating leadership training programs. Together, they have successfully led to transformation of numerous business while helping them pivot into new, innovative, mission-driven operation models. So that's just a sample of what they have to offer of their background. But without further ado, I want to introduce the Niche Finder podcast community to Mr. Devon Watts and Jimmy Gonzalez, the host of the Legacy and Leadership podcast. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having us, man. Super humbled and just thankful for the opportunity, and man, looking forward to chopping it up with the Niche Finder community. The merger of communities. We got our Legacy Leader community. We got the Niche Finder community. Man, it's going to be magic, man. It's going to be magic.
We love building communities, and like you said, just being a part of somebody else's community and just sharing the love. We like to say, the Legacy and Leadership podcast, the hotness that is the podcast. We'll try to bring a little bit of that, like you said, and hopefully drop a few golden nuggets along the way from your community as well.
Absolutely. All right. So tell the audience, why would they have a vested interest in your journey?
So I think really what it boils down to is, what what has been our passion and our drive that has gotten us to this point in the first place. It is the impact of our fathers. We're both juniors, and the names that we carry. It just brings a lot of weight, and it's many conversations that we've had about that, and just our own interpersonal thoughts, and really diving into what that means to us and how we live that out, and how we represent not just the name of our fathers, but of course our families. We both have children as well. So how do we pass on that legacy, and really what it means to be a Watts man, to be a Gonzalez man, or a female, as I have young daughters as well. And just that also that entrepreneur spirit that we've had, even in the many years that we've had in corporate America. But honestly, especially where we met, the employer that we worked with, probably about 6 months after I started, I was already trying to leave. And not because of the environment necessarily, but because of that drive that I had to own my own business and to do something different. So we've individually and even together, we've had opportunities where we have combined our efforts to start and work on different business ventures, and to actually even help others along their journey over the years. So all of those things, I think, really, have impacted us, and that story, which I think is compelling and will continue to be compelling to listeners out there and the audience that we're looking to serve.
What did you want to accomplish at the start of your journey? When you came together and said, we want to do this legacy and leadership, what did good look like to you?
So I would say when we first got together and we started the Legacy and Leadership podcast, it was really, us trying to capture conversations that we've been having for years. Like kind of Jimmy mentioned this, one of our very first conversations years ago, man, just chopping it up. Like when we first got to know one another, even though we were in corporate spaces, we were just talking about leadership. We were talking about mindset. And I recall sharing with him, like, man, my goal is always to like run my team like it's my own business. Right. And we've just always had that kind of entrepreneurial, kind of makeup about us. And again, over the past decades or so, as that relationship has grown, and we've been fortunate enough to, have front row seats to, one another growing as men, growing in our faith, growing with our family, right? We just continue to come back to these conversations around leadership. And so when we got together and we said, hey, let's start a podcast. I recently relocated to South Florida. We wanted to make sure that we still had that connection, that support system that we had been accustomed to having for over, a decade plus or so. And we said, man, let's cut on the microphone. Let's cut on the camera. We both know we can run our mouths, and let's just go from there. And as we started to tell this story of legacy that just kind of peppered everything that we've gone through over these, the past decade, we started to really understand the intersectionality of legacy, of leadership, of our family names, of how all of those things shaped us. And as we started putting these stories out there, we started getting feedback from folks. It was like, man, hey, this, I appreciate the story. I appreciate what you guys are sharing. This is connecting with me. I want to hear more. Folks started reaching out, asking, well, how do I get more focused feedback around what I'm building? And from that, listening to our experiences and our intuition, the Legacy Leadership Learning Group was born in December of 2020. And that's kind of how we, really jumped off our entrepreneurial coaching business that we're in the process of building right now.
I love a quote, and thank you for sharing that. Marcus Garvey actually has a great quote. He says, people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. I noticed that when I listen to Legacy and Leadership, there is a tremendous amount of roots that I find. There's a step to your podcast and the questions that you ask your and even the philosophies that you subscribe to, some of which has just been highlighted by you. But when you consider what your niche is, right? Men who have roots planted obviously in good ground. What do you consider your niche, and why is that valuable to the audience?
Yeah, so I would say that like a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders, us discovering our niche has really been a journey. And it's really been a culmination of two things: our experiences and then also your intuition, right? Like the experiences that have shaped us even before we entered the corporate spaces and we were men, as young men. And, from sports, you hear us, if you're listening to the pod, you hear us talk about sports all the time. That's because sports was huge in terms of shaping our leadership philosophy. We talk about our fathers because our fathers played a huge role in shaping, how we view leadership and how we view our responsibilities as men, right? And
And then obviously the experiences we've amassed in our, navigating some corporate spaces and entrepreneurs, but also the intuition, just continue to listen to that voice and that gut feeling, right? And that has led us to where we can proudly say that we've discovered our niche, which is really to serve as entrepreneurial coaches for minority men, specifically guiding them on how to start, scale, and keep a business that they can pass down. Because at the intersectionality of what we define leadership or legacy to be, right? For us, legacy comes down to faith, comes down to family, it comes down to finances. Well, what sits in the middle of all that is entrepreneurship. Right. If you're delivering as an entrepreneur, if you're delivering in terms of building a business, something that you can pass on, you're doing it because you're able to deliver in all three of those areas, right? You're taking care of your family, you're taking care of your finances, and more importantly, you're taking care of your faith, because we definitely believe that his divine hand is involved in every single gift that we've been given, and ultimately, the passions we pursue.
That's powerful. And I appreciate you sharing that as well. Now, tell me, what type of external struggles did you find yourself up against at the start of your journey?
I think for us, it was, just learning this new industry when it comes to podcasting. And you asked a good question, like what did good or great look like to us? And as coming from the learning and development space and creating content, there was definitely a certain vision that I had. We're blessed that we have some experience and talents that really have gelled well together. Devon has experience in the music industry as an artist. So the audio aspect, was always, we knew had to be on point. Visually, we knew and made a conscious decision at the very beginning that it was going to be the podcast, the audio version, but that we also wanted that visual component, which we call a vidcast, as well with the YouTube channel. So just that learning process of what does it really mean to have a really good podcast that one is going to touch people, that is going to be entertaining to individuals, and is going to keep, again, that specific community wanting to come back and hear more, and then growing, and taking the steps to really grow the podcast and the audience itself, which thankfully we've been able to do that fairly organically, over the last year, without really putting any money into like advertising to build the audience. So that piece of it has been tremendous for us. And as Devon said, the Legacy and Leadership podcast, it also started as us wanting to have a vehicle that no matter what may happen and whatever, God's plan is for us, our children, God willing, grandchildren and great grandchildren, we always have something out there that they can go back and learn from and say, oh, that's my grandpa, my great grandpa, abuelo, and be able to see us talking and having these conversations. So it was primarily about that. And then as we got rolling and started to get better at it and refine and tune it and decide we have to be true to ourselves, as Devon said, and really turn this into a business. That's when we started to niche down even more, and knowing men of color, that is who we want to work with. That is who we want to speak to. That is the impact that we want to be able to have, especially because we've had not just our fathers, but there's been other men in our lives that have impacted us and helped us through mentorship and example to get us to where we're at today. So part of that is paying it forward as well.
Albert Einstein says you can't solve a problem at the same level at which it was created. And so when you talk about your journey, what epiphany did you experience and what new opportunity did you discover from that event?
So I think there's a couple of things. One, like Jimmy kind of mentioned when we started out, again, we really wanted to make sure that we had a vehicle to kind of memorialize our thoughts and our, what we value and our passions, because we knew how important legacy was for us. Like, we knew that from the beginning. Again, it peppered all of our conversations, so we knew we wanted to build something around it, right? As we continued to niche down more into our business and really kind of understand who we wanted to serve, I honestly, I think it when we talk about intuition, it's, timing also plays a role in that, right? Because at the time that we launched the podcast, you're talking about the middle of the pandemic, right? Which obviously caused everybody to be much more introspective than they were before, and change how we connected, right? We had the absence of connection. And so that in some respects heightened the importance of connecting, right, and having relationships. But then you also have that coupled with just the scenes of social injustice, like happening over and over again, right? And given the fact that we're both, again, men of color, minority men, obviously these things that we're seeing on our TV screens and social media resonate with us just a little bit differently than maybe other individuals. And, thinking about leadership, I guess kind of our first instinct is like, how can I lead through this? How can I contribute something in order to shape this? And we came to the epiphany, right, that given our experiences and our passion for entrepreneurship, and when you look at across history, when minorities have been able to really advance themselves from a social justice perspective and a social freedom perspective, it's been prefaced by economic freedom. Like when you look at post-Civil War, like Reconstruction, when you look at the fact that these communities have been built, that, there's this spirit of entrepreneurship that is embedded in the DNA of these minorities, right? We knew then that that's where our calling was, because if we can help people realize their entrepreneurial birthright and deliver more on economic freedom, that can also be a pathway to equipping people with the ability to, push the social freedom, the social justice that we so rightly deserve and that we should continue to push. And so, I can tell you that we only came to that realization, again, through, a lot of reflection about our passions, about our purpose. And also, like I said, just kind of coming back to that 10% of divine, intervention, the timing of when we decided to do all of this and what we were exposed to really helped to highlight, exactly what our purpose was.
I want to go off script for one quick second, because I think when you start talking about people of color and people feeling disenfranchised or disenchanted of the American dream, what drove you to take this course of action, right? And then I'll back into it even a little bit further. Quite often, the place that we launch from may not be the same place that we land, right? And so you have people who go through the same kind of conflict that you're talking about, and they end up on the wrong side of this thing, right? And so it's the reason why, there's so much, many, there are a lot of systems that's involved in that, and it definitely is a hand grenade of a topic. But what caused you to not take the path that many people take of becoming more of a rebel versus someone who was pursuing a cause, like what Devon, what you're pursuing, as well as Jimmy, what you're building together with Legacy and Leadership?
Well, so a couple of things. One, I'll throw it back at you. You started off with a quote about Marcus Garvey and, not, understanding your history, and not understanding your history is like a tree with no roots. And so like going back to our history, when you really see how our people responded, how minorities responded after the Emancipation Proclamation, and really having no mechanism for introduction into society, just somebody popped up right on the plantation and said, hey, you're free now. Right. There was no medical services. There were no businesses, right? And obviously there was still a segregation. Our folks had to figure out how to build something from nothing. And they did it. They did it. They built these communities. They found ways to leverage what they've learned and all the kind of the pain and the strife and the turmoil that they've endured over those years. And they use it as fuel for creativity, ingenuity, and being able to build something. And then through building something, they were able to find their voice. And then now you see all of these people of color, blacks that entered into politics and started to work as government officials. And then now you have representation, right? And so I think that learning from history was really informative in helping to push us in this direction. And then I would also just challenge you a little bit and to say that I think what we're doing is actually pretty rebellious in the sense that I haven't been exposed to a lot of folks that have the same type of vision or commitment to say, hey, you know what my calling is I'm going to help people unlock their economic freedom, and I'm going to help them build their business, right? It's very easy to be passively involved in social justice, right? I can do the Black Lives Matter hashtag. I can put the black square. I can post the flags. I can retweet when I see something. I can add it to my IG story and say, oh, this is wrong, right? And then I can go back to scrolling my timeline or playing whatever on Netflix. But what Jimmy and I have committed to doing is saying, we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to get involved in the way that we know how, in the way that God has blessed us to be able to do, right? Which is pour into minority men specifically and help to speak life into them about the opportunity for entrepreneurship, because it's our birthright. And that's gotten lost in translation over these past couple of years. Like, if, our forefathers who were slaves and, again, just the atrocities that they went through, was able to pull themselves up out of that and find a way in order to build something and create legacy, with all the access to stuff that we have available to us today, we can do the exact same thing, but somebody needs to be able to speak that vision into you and let you know that's a reality. And so I think what we're doing is a little bit rebellious in that respect. But, we'll gladly wear the moniker of rebels if it comes to, pushing the agenda forward.
All right. Jimmy, did you want to share anything on that?
No, I just think, representation is so important. And for me, I didn't even really realize what we were doing meant to other people that were watching us. And we talk about men, but even young men, right, in their 20s or students in college and high school, and being able to see men like ourselves that have the experience that we have, that love to teach, love to share that experience with other people, are able to go into business together, have been doing business and sharing life together for such a long time. And there's no tension, we didn't want to have a debate podcast or anything like that. At our heart, we're educators, we're teachers. We love to speak and again, to share knowledge and to keep learning. That is huge for us as well. And we talk a lot about that in the podcast and in our conversations. What else can we continue to do to sharpen our saw and to be practitioners of what we do so that we can share that with other people. And with so many images out there in the world that kind of go against what we really know, we to be as a people and as men, we want to show this, to men that have families, that are doing their best to take care of their families, that are men of faith, that have been in the corporate environment, know how to navigate that space. But you know what? Rebellious in the sense that we're going to take all this knowledge that we've gained from corporate America, and we want to give it back to you, to our people that are out there that either never wanted to be a part of that, or they're trying to release themselves, from that corporate environment and have something that is their own. Not just stock options are a beautiful thing, but not just stock options, but this is my business that I can actually pass along to my family and my descendants if that's what I choose to do.
My family is from Jamaica, and my dad used to always say, Clifford, knowledge is the key, man. And I used to say like that, what are you talking about? And then I got older and I realized that, the knowledge, the key to knowledge actually unlocks doors that ignorance closes us off to, right? And so what I hear you sharing, and I love it. I love the fact that, the history that was brought out by what you were saying, Devon, and also Jimmy, what you saying as far as the importance of why we need to bring this forward, why we need to change the optics to how we're seen as African Americans or as people of color, and I think this is so important. And I applaud you for the efforts that you're making to not think small and to just not think big and not execute, but to think big and execute on it. And I think that's commendable. So thank you for doing that. For not just for your community, but for all those who are tuning in, period. Thank you so much. Right now I want to talk about our niche. I define niche as 5 key questions, right? This is just from the research from doing my own book, Dream Octane. And the first question is, what are your passions, right? The second is purposeful. The third is patterns. So these are the things that you do naturally well. The fourth, proficiencies. What have you learned to do well over time? And the last one is problem solving. And so I'll throw these out there. Feel free to answer them as you so please. The first one, passions. What in the times past did you have a strong interest in that you feel has gotten you to where your niche is today?
I talked a little bit about, our love for teaching and just, being educators at heart. And part of, my history specifically, my dad worked in corporate America my whole life. My mom, she's retired now, they both retired, was a teacher since I was 3 years old. So I always felt like I was blessed to have the best of both worlds, especially as I entered into the corporate environment and then getting into the L&D space. But I love teaching. Devon loves teaching. We love coaching. Like that's always been a part of what we've done is coaching sales and customer service reps. And really, how do I get the best out of this person and help them to see something in themselves that maybe they don't see? And in doing so, get you going from good to great and then from great to outstanding. So coaching, mentoring others, whether that is people, within our immediate circle, being a part of volunteer opportunities in our community to mentor young kids, young adults. Those are all things that we have huge passion for that we've taken advantage of in the past. And then again, helping entrepreneurs. That is a passion of both of ours. And several years ago, I had another company that was more focused on kind of social media and helping small businesses with that. And it really hurt my heart to see somebody with a vision and a passion, and they started. And because they weren't able to get people into their business or to get known and really market themselves, before you know it, you see this mom and pop restaurant that had, just the greatest, Italian food or Spanish food. And then before you know it, it's just closed down. And how do we help them, again, not just to start the business, because that is super easy to do these days, but how do you scale it? And then how do you keep it long term so that you're not just even impacting your family, but you're impacting the community in which you have that establishment, if it's brick and mortar or just the community that you build online.
What do you do that feels purposeful? What do you do when you do it, you feel like I was born for this moment?
So I really think it comes back down to like helping people really find their purpose, right? I think that's what continues to feed us as leaders, as teachers, right? Like it doesn't matter what roles we've held. And we've been fortunate enough to hold a litany of roles, whether it's in learning development, process improvement, whether it's actually running operations, whether it's volunteer work, and it doesn't matter what we're doing. At the end of the day, somehow we find a way to scratch that itch to teach, right? To teach and to speak life into somebody and to help them find their purpose, and to leave their legacy. And so every time we have that moment where we're speaking to somebody and it clicks for them, or we get somebody to open up and share their vision and their passions. And then that's met with validation, and not just validation, but also affirmation that you can do that. And you see how they respond to that. Like we both walk away from those situations saying, man, this is exactly what we've been called to do. And it's funny because, no matter, what we're working on, right, or how successful we end up being, if we can't fulfill that, if we can't scratch that, we get disinterested very quickly. We get disinterested very quickly, and we try to find ways that we can feed that, right? And so definitely helping people find their purpose and ultimately plant the seed for them to grow their legacy is what makes us feel like we have a purpose.
What do you do naturally well?
I really feel we're great coaches. Our ability to not just create and cast a vision, but refine that vision along the way, and really, make it real and make it palatable to people. And then also strategy, creating and teaching strategy and helping folks. All right, goal setting is a part of that, right? So what are the goals that you have? How do we help you set goals? And then how do we reverse engineer that to put the strategy in place that is going to give you the best possible chance of success at attaining those goals that you have for yourself?
What problems do people come to you to solve?
So folks actually, they come to us for a couple of different things. One, just about leadership in general, and like the leadership mindset, or how do I handle like conflict? How do I handle, creating accountability? Goal setting is another one. I think, and I appreciate you kind of calling this out, Cliff, right? Which is we've been able to establish a reputation of not just being able to create the strategy, but execute the strategy. And I think that's one of the things that people really value in terms of reaching out to us and picking our brains about, is because not only can we help you kind of with the creation portion of it, but we can really help make tangible the implementation, which I think a lot of folks ultimately struggle with. Like, how do I take this thing from idea and actually manifest it, right? And so we have folks that'll reach out to us about those things specifically, right? The entrepreneurship, how to become an entre leader, and then ultimately our leadership mindset.
And then now proficiency, last question in this segment, is the opposite side of the coin of patterns. So where patterns are what you do naturally well, proficiencies are what you've learned to do well over time. So what do you consider your proficiencies?
We really feel like we've gotten pretty proficient at content creation and building communities. Even with the podcasting piece, again, we wanted it to be practitioners. So studying and learning, listening. We already are podcast listeners ourselves, but studying and listening from a different perspective. And how do I create something and glean from other people? Online learning, at all kinds of social media platforms, just trying to get that information. But then building a community, like how do you do that, especially in this virtual, social media space that we have with all of these different platforms? How do you grow individually, but then connect those communities as well? And, we've been very happy and, have had to make sure that we're intentional. And this is something that we help entrepreneurs with as well, is celebrate the wins, that we've been able to see along the way. So, we talked about it, about 56 actual podcast episodes. We're reaching 7,000 downloads. We're in over 101 different countries. The amount of videos, about 92 videos or so on our YouTube channel, the subscriber count that we have on the YouTube channel. So those are all things that we've been able to accomplish over the last year that we had to work at and really felt like we've been able to get very proficient at. And as you mentioned the seasons, as we close season 2 and we look to season 3, which will be starting in July, like that's the question is, okay, how do we make it better? How do we continue to learn and refine and continue to provide an even better experience for the community that's been rocking with us, but hopefully all the new people that are going to, find our podcast and learn about what we do and hopefully resonate with that. How do we create an experience that's special and meaningful for them?
So I know you guys are big basketball fans, same as myself. So I want to preface this next and last segment, which is your secrets, right? And so I want to just tell a quick story, and then we're going to get into your secrets. And this is you talking to me, but you're really going to be talking to me, but you actually speaking directly to your younger self, right? So 20 years earlier, or wherever you were at the start of your journey. So before we get to that, though, and I'm not sure if you're aware of the story of Kobe Bryant, where he won an Oscar on May 5th. Was the March 5th, 2018 at the 90th Academy Awards. He won an Oscar for Dear Basketball, which basically was a letter that he penned for retirement, right? So in the back, after he won this award, he went to the backstage, and what I found in this article, I thought it was pretty interesting. They have, as soon as you step off the stage with your Oscar, they have all of these reporters that are in this like back area in the stands, and they get to hit you with questions just as you feeling the elation and you just kind of going off the top of your head. So they asked Kobe, I think it was like reporter number 82 stood up and said, Kobe, you won over 5 championships. You have all of these accomplishments in your basketball career. How does this award measure up against that? And Kobe smiled, he had that baby face type of smile. And he said, I gotta be honest with you. This award actually means more to me than those awards. And as I'm reading this article, I'm saying, wow, Kobe, the Black Mamba is saying this, right? About winning an Oscar. And he says, here's why. He says, I always saw myself playing basketball. I always saw myself since I was 8 years old winning championships. He says, but this Oscar came out of left field for me. He says, as a matter of fact, right before I went into retirement, people would say, like, Kobe, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I would tell them I want to be a writer. He said people were respectful enough not to snicker, but you can see that they really wasn't on that wavelength with him, right? And so he said the only person that believed in him, or people that believed in him, was his family, was his wife and his daughters at the time. And he said he just started to write. Long and short of it, as history now tells his story, he actually turned that letter into, a score. He turned it into Dear Basketball. They created a whole thing over it. But now the reason that I bring this up is that in my book, Dream Octane, when I reference Kobe's story, yes, he's won all of these things. And even it says when you're wildly successful, you could still have more to give. And so he's in the segment where I talk about, do you have more to give, or maximizing your abundant factor? Now, we use this story to preface what your niche is, right? At the very start of your journey, you had passion, you had your purpose, you had your patterns, you had all of these things clicking for you, and you just had the potential for where you want to be in the future. Now, talk to yourself. Now that you got all this wisdom of what you have, what secret would you tell your pre-niche self to help accelerate them from where they are at that point to where you are today?
Cool. So I got one, and then I'm confident that Jimmy has one as well. And it's something that we've really refined throughout this journey. And when we hit it, I thought it was impactful. I definitely want to be able to pass it on. The first thing is, you can't just be, intentional about being consistent. You have to be consistently intentional. Right. When we started off the podcast, for example, like, again, we didn't know anything about the space. We knew that we were going to figure it out. We had confidence in one another that, hey, we're going to figure this thing out. And if what we could do, what was within our control was, hey, we at least need to be consistent. We need to be consistent in content creation and showing up and recording and all of that stuff. Right. And as we learned and we implemented that and we started to see growth, we also then started to realize that while we were intentional about being consistent, we weren't consistently intentional, right? We weren't consistently intentional on how we were planning, working our plan, executing our vision, identifying our purpose, all of that, right? And so if I had to cast anything back to my younger self, because when we stumbled across that, I was like, man, that revelation would have been so helpful, for 17-year-old me, 16-year-old me, 15-year-old me, right? Which is, again, it's good to be intentional about being consistent, but can you be consistently intentional?
Love it.
No, we talk about intentionality very often. And I would tell my younger self, because things that I've done in the past have culminated to where we're at now. But I've been an entrepreneurial, serial entrepreneur. And one of the mistakes I made in the past is not getting a coach. So I would tell myself, invest in yourself and get a coach, and show that you're willing to make that investment and not go it alone. So if you need accountability, there's accountability there, but you're not just researching and reading articles and books and learning from other people that have maybe done what you're trying to do, but you're actually allowing yourself to be working with somebody and paying for it and investing in yourself that is going to help you walk through some steps and provide you a roadmap that maybe you wouldn't be able to receive without making that investment.
Hey, real quick there, actually, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to go off script just a little bit because Jimmy just sparked an idea. And actually, you did too, Cliff, because you're talking about Kobe. And everybody knows the accolades that Kobe's been able to achieve on the court, right? But one of the things because we actually did an MBA session on Kobe Bryant in season 2. MBA, for those that are not familiar with the podcast, is our Mentored by Adversity segment, where we usually bring on a guest and we have them walk us through how they got their MBA in leadership, how they were mentored by adversity, and that helped them become a better leader. And so in honor of the passing of Kobe, we wanted to break down his life through tape and through what we knew. And one of the things I stumbled across, which I thought was so impactful and kind of cosigns the importance of having a coach, is as great as Kobe was, Kobe always sought out instruction and feedback, but from people that he trusted, right? Like, you have to be able to have discernment. They were sharing a story, like, normally what Kobe likes to do when he would land is he would find, as soon as he touches down, find a local high school or something like that, so he can get some shots up at the gym and go through his workout routine. And they ended up landing, I forgot what state specifically, but they ended up landing in the city, and there was only one high school that would be willing to open up, and this is like 11, almost midnight, open up for Kobe. So they had to get the high school basketball coach to get up out of bed, to drive, to open up the gym just for Kobe to go through his routine. And he, obviously, the high school coach stayed just to kind of watch him go through his routine and stuff like that, right? And through that, they ended up building a relationship. And every time Kobe came back to this city, he would only go to that high school and he would work with that coach. He would go through his exercise. The coach would be there. Well, that relationship built up so much, so strong, that Kobe actually ended up hiring him as his own personal coach.
Wow.
And the guy continued to travel with him through the duration of his career. This is obviously the post-Shaq years and stuff like that, when Kobe had everything on his shoulders in terms of being the guy. And he continued to work with that guy specifically. Now, you think Kobe's already got rings under his belt. He done got coached by Phil Jackson. He's then got personal coaching and tutelage from Michael Jordan, right? All of these individuals that he's observed from a distance and studied their game and their stories about him, rewatching Michael Jordan's game tape to understand how he goes left and how he goes right. And yet, even through all of that, Kobe Bryant understood the value of having individual coaching, having somebody on his side that can give him critiques, feedback about his game so that he can continue to improve. So I think the point that Jimmy's making is so spot on is, being able to have that outside perspective, being able to have somebody else that you can trust that, has the discernment, your best interest, and wants to see you be successful, no matter what your skill set is, no matter what your natural God-given ability is, no matter what your niche is, still having that individual that can speak into you and coach you up is the key to becoming a champion, and not just becoming a champion, but becoming legendary, creating a legacy. Because I like to think that relationship definitely played a huge factor in Kobe Bryant's sustained success and why he was able to perform at such a high level for such a long period of time.
You know what? And I want to kind of, sink our toes into this point that you're making real quick, because, I was just watching the NBA playoffs just this past weekend. It's so interesting what you're bringing up, because they were talking about Julius Randle and how his growth and development. I mean, this guy went from nobody know his name to everybody know what his name in New York, right? And basically in a year, essentially. And so they told the story of Julius Randle when he was a rookie with Kobe and the Lakers first year, right? And so he touched down in Texas. He had some family in Texas. This is Julius Randle, had family in Texas. And he says Kobe saw him walking out of the stadium just as they landed, right? They still had time before the game. And Kobe said to Julius, where are you going? And he says, I'm gonna go visit some family. I got a couple things lined up. We're gonna do some dinner, just regular stuff. And he says, nah, man, we about to go put up some shots. He said, we about to go shoot 500 shots in this gym down the street. You coming with me, rookie? And so he took him with him. Now, fast forward years later, Julius Randle now touches down. I think it was in Utah, someplace, right? He's no longer with Kobe. He's now on his own team and everything. And as soon as he touched down, he did just what Kobe asked him to do, right? That year, he carried it on and continued to keep doing it, to put up 500 shots, contacted the coach or someone to open up the door. And as the guy's opening up the door to the gym, he says, you know what? The last person to ever use this gym, do you know who it was? He says, who was it? He said, Kobe Bryant. So when you talk about legacy, bro, yeah, the same influence. It's just it just pays it forward, man. It's just so wow. I appreciate you sharing that, man. I'm going to get off basketball, man, because we'll be here all night. I'm telling you right now.
For sure.
Yeah, we get into our sports bag every once in a while. We have to remind, this is not a sports podcast.
It's a leadership podcast.
It is a leadership podcast. There's so much that you can extract from situations and stories like that. It's just phenomenal.
It's so true, man. So now that you've discovered your niche, how challenging is it to do what you do?
Go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know that. I think the biggest challenge, and for entrepreneurs, right, is that mindset piece. Is once you really know, and specifically for me, this is it. It is not just our niche. It's not just a tribe or a community, but this is our purpose. I want it now. I want to get to that point now. But it takes time. It takes time to ensure that the steps that we're taking are the right steps. It takes time to continue to build again and do it right and be disciplined enough to check all the boxes and make sure that you're doing all the things that, again, not just allows you to start a business, but to scale it and then keep it. So this is not just something that we'll have for a couple of years, but as long as we choose to, it's going to be something that is viable and out there to help people. And for me, I think that's the biggest challenge is, focusing on being patient and just making sure that knowing that if we are intentional about the things that we need to take care of, the the other dreams that we have as far as growing the business and the people that we wanted to help in the future, like it's going to continue to happen. It's going to continue to scale as long as we're patient and being intentional about the things that matter most today and sticking to the plan that we've established for ourselves.
Yep. Agreed.
Love it. How frequent should one make time to work on their niche?
I mean, I feel like it's a continuous thing. In terms of like when you're talking about feeding into your purpose and learning and growing, I mean, we've been doing that before we even decided to start the business, right? Like that's how much it was ingrained in us as a part of our purpose and our passion. We pursued it because we loved it, right? And then once we came to the realization again that this is our purpose and that we're actually going to be delivering something here and executing on these God-given abilities, that just ratcheted up the obsession even more. I mean, there's been plenty of times, random times at night, like we're texting each other and sending each other things that we read, or hey, I came across this article, or we're again studying. And I think the other thing too, right? Like once you understand what your niche is, it's kind of like you remember when you first saw the car that you fell in love with. Right. And like you made your mind up like, hey man, I want that. Like I want the 03 Impala. Like, man, I want the Range Rover. And then you started to see it everywhere. I think the same is true of like your niche and your purpose. Like once you identify it, you start to see it permeate everything around you. Like you're just, it smacks you in the face. Right. And so like when, like Jimmy mentioned, like we listen to podcasts. Well, now we listen to podcasts, but we're consuming that same thing through a different lens of our purpose. And okay, well, how can we take some of the things that we're hearing and tie it into our purpose and tie it into what we're trying to execute on and deliver on, from, our day-to-day coaching interactions, or, it's funny, man, like so many stories on our podcast, end up being encapped or told through our experiences as fathers. Right. And, we're just raising our kids and living our lives. Right. But now that we understand our purpose, we also have that lens when we're interacting with our kids that says, oh man, this is a great lesson about my interaction between me and Lennox or me and Gio about what we were talking about with decision making or navigating internal conflict. So I think, when you identify your niche or your purpose, it doesn't stop. Like you're always working on it. You just have to have clarity in your purpose.
Now, last two questions that I have for you. How do you know when it's time to change course versus staying focused on your goal?
Yeah, you just have to be honest with yourself. My wife, she blessed me with a book for my birthday in March called The Dip, and it was really talking about knowing when to keep going and when to quit. And is what I'm doing and these actions that I'm taking, adding value to the goals and the things that I'm trying to accomplish and to the community and the people that I'm trying to serve. And if it's not, then I have to be real about that. And I have to assess and change directions, and either change directions or completely stop doing that activity, or surrounding myself with these individuals or people that are not, again, adding value to what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. If there's some type of tension or roadblocks, that are created because of those relationships, and that can be hard for individuals to do. But as soon as you know that it's time to change course, think about the appropriate ways and the steps that you should go about doing that professionally, again, appropriately, depending on what the circumstances are. But once you've discovered that, then make that move and make it a reality. Because your vision, right? We talk about having uncompromising vision, and as an uncompromising entrepreneur, I can't compromise on the things that are going to deviate or, again, distract me or stop me from progressing in a positive manner and at the pace that I want to progress at, to reaching my goals. And reaching my goals means I'm helping people. I'm helping them see their vision become a reality. And that is just powerful in itself. So anything that deviates from that, I got to cut it off. I got to clip it. And in doing that and narrowing our focus, it allows us to grow and expand even more and even at a rapid pace. Very much like, pruning a flower or a plant. Sometimes you got to cut some things off so that there's more growth in the end.
Love it. And Devon, anything you want to share on that point, or you want me to?
Nah, bro, knocked it out the park. That's my co-host.
All right, dope. So listen, last question that I have for you. What action item would you give to the niche finder community that you would say is a must-have to staying committed?
I'll go back. Actually, I'm going to keep it real simple. Twofold. One is, I'll start with this one because I want to end on a note that Jimmy made. But I've always been a firm believer. It's been a personal mantra of mine. And so I'll pass this on for our niche finder community out there. It is important for you to live in the vision, not in the circumstances. Live in the vision, not in the circumstances. Once you define your purpose, once you understand what your vision is, don't worry about the current circumstances. Continue to live in that vision, pursue that vision, and the circumstances will change around you in order to make sure that manifests appropriately. And the last thing that I would give in terms of tactical, again, we talked about Kobe. We talked about, Jimmy's, word of advice to his younger self. Get a coach, invest in yourself. Like, you are the most valuable resource investment that you can make. I know some people say, like, purchasing your home, like, that's the biggest investment you ever make in your life. That's a lie, right? That's the second one, right? Maybe the third one even, right? But the number one is you. And if you're willing to, bet on yourself to take, student loans and stuff like that, right? If you're willing to get consumer, credit card debt, right? Because you're betting on yourself that you're going to earn enough money to be able to pay it down and, right, and not max out that card. If you're willing to bet on yourself in those situations, and you should be willing to bet on yourself and invest in yourself when it comes to building your business, building your legacy, manifesting your purpose, actualizing your purpose, manifesting your vision, right? Invest in yourself, get a coach. Because a coach can really help to accelerate you being able to clarify your purpose and help you manifest, again, your vision sooner than later.
How would they get in contact with you? The people finding what you have to say is something that is not only impactful, but they want to keep the conversation going. How would they get in contact with you?
Well, definitely. You mentioned earlier, which I appreciate at the beginning, Legacy and Leadership Podcast on YouTube itself, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. We have a Legacy Leader community on Facebook, which you are more than happy to come and join as well. legacyandleadership@gmail.com if you ever want to kind of shoot us an email. We're also on Instagram, so Coach_Jimmy G Jr. At Leadership Docent. You can DM us as well if you had any questions or want to pick our brain on information that you're looking to find for yourself or any guidance that you may be looking for. We're on all social media platforms. Again, the podcast itself is on all major podcast platforms. We've had people that reached out to us, through the podcast as well, and have left not just reviews, but left comments and questions. So that's another way that people have reached out to us. And we love engaging, whether it's on the podcast or even on a YouTube channel. We love engaging in those conversations via those platforms and answering questions and continuing to take the conversation beyond just Devon and myself, but have that same conversation with our community as well.
Well, pleasure having you guys on today. So much wealth of information that you shared. And I wish that we can keep the conversation going. So for those people who, again, have enjoyed the content from today's show, let's just hit these brothers up, man. From the time that I connected with Devon first and Jimmy after the fact, but they are some good brothers, and it's good to have people like these type of individuals in your life, because there's so much that they have to offer. It's not just words, man. It's actually action and a lot of execution behind what they're doing. So definitely good people to have in your inner circle and your circle period, because they can definitely add value to you and who you are. If you want to get in contact with us, we will find out what we're doing. Definitely reach us on dreamoctane.org. You can see, the latest and greatest things that we have to help you to discover, develop, and to deliver your niche. And then, as you know, on Spotify as well as on Podbean, if you like what you're listening to, follow us and, like us on these different platforms. Go on to Legacy on Leadership, listen to an episode, pick it at random, and I guarantee you, your finger will be compelled to hit that like button.
Hey.
All right.
Yes, Yes, sir.
So I would just say, just reach out, support as much as possible, help us with the algorithm. You leave comments, leave likes and so on, because again, that helps and it's encouraging as well. And as they said, it will interface with you. So, again, we'll just end this episode. But again, this is just the beginning of a bigger conversation if you choose to have that conversation continue. So we hope that it will be. But for this episode, we're going to call it quits for right now. And we're going to sign off, but only to whet your appetite for the very next episode. Thank you for tuning in to this version of the Niche Finder podcast. We see you on the other side at the very next episode. Thanks again.
You have just listened to the Uncompromising Entrepreneur Podcast, hosted by Jimmy Gonzalez and Devon Watts. Thank you, and we hope that you pursue your passion, create profits, and build a legacy. Until next time, y'all.